This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. We are joined once again by our very good friend, Jill Bucaro, who is joining us all the way from Wellness Riot in Los Angeles. How are you today, Jill?
I'm excellent. Thank you, Jamie.
Now, today we are going to be speaking about a topic that we have touched upon before in our very first interview, actually. We're going to be speaking about food allergies. And I think my first question for you, Jill, what is a food allergy exactly?
So the definition of an allergy is an inappropriate response by the body's immune system to a substance that is not normally harmful. So there's two things in that. One is that it's our immune system that is involved in this response. And then the other is that it's something that's not normally harmful, right? Like it's not a poison that affects all of us. So it's something that's specific to maybe you or me, but not everybody. So that's what the definition of the allergy is. And then there's an allergy versus like a sensitivity or an intolerance. So I think those words we've probably heard a lot more lately, like I'm sensitive to gluten or I'm, lactose intolerant is a good, example. And so that's a little bit different. So the allergy is going to be, again, like an immune system response that might be systemic. But if you have a food sensitivity or intolerance, the reaction tends to stem from the digestive system. So it's just an inability to digest or process that specific food. So like, again, you might not have the right enzyme to break it down, like lactose intolerance, or it might be reactions to things like food additives or preservatives like MSG or sulfites or artificial colors or things like that. So the immune response is, the body thinks it's an invader, right? It's foreign, it's not supposed to be there. Whereas like that sensitivity or intolerance is more like, we don't have the materials we need or the raw goods or the enzymes or whatever that is to process this food appropriately.
That makes complete sense. Now, if we were speaking about a food allergy proper, what kind of symptoms would we be talking about?
So those might be something like that we would see like almost on a commercial, right? Like an allergy medicine commercial. So like it might be like sneezing or runny nose or, like even like a rash or a hive or watery eyes or things like that. So those can be, that's kind of an allergic response to anything, environment or food or whatever.
Yes.
Then it can also go to the gut. So you can also have things like loose bowels or sluggish bowels or, bloating or gas or things like that. So it can be what we think of as an allergic response, but then also some digestive related too.
And how do people usually treat allergies? What's their first thing? Do they grab that pill bottle?
Typically, yeah. I mean, when it's a genuine allergy, right? Like you want to avoid it as much as possible. But when you can't, it tends to be things like medications like antihistamines, decongestants, and then things to soothe, like eye drops or creams or sprays or things like that. But for the sensitivities, because it's digestive related, or the intolerance is digestive related. And then even beyond that, it can be digestive related, but it can also be things like achy joints, brain fog, like low energy. It can affect your mood. It can maybe cause a headache or nervousness. In those cases, I mean, we could use like anything. I mean, we could use like caffeine to ibuprofen to antacids to antidepressants. So a lot of times we're treating the symptoms there's such a variety of symptoms that we're really kind of just attacking the symptom for ease, right? And relief, rather than knowing maybe that it is even a sensitivity or an allergic reaction.
Now, you must come across allergies, sensitivities, and intolerances so often in your line of work. What is a more kind of holistic approach to countering these kind of reactions?
So there's a couple of key, I would say like organs or systems that are kind of involved. Mm-hmm. And the number one is our gut for a couple reasons. One is that that's how we tend to take in the outside world, right? So we eat, we drink. And so it's kind of our first line of defense, but also our 70% of our immune system is in and around the gut. So when there's a compromised gut, it's going to trigger that immune system. And that's, kind of an important area of focus. So it's kind of like when something gets into the club that's not supposed to, right? Like our immune system is kind of like the bouncer.
Right.
And so when it's overworked or when it's compromised, it might miss somebody trying to get into the club. And the club is like our bloodstream, right? So once it gets past, like outside of our gut, our immune system's like, whoa, like what's going on here, right? Like this needs to go. And that looks like an awful lot like an allergic response. So the thing to note here too is that it's not always the thing that's the problem, it's where it is. So, when people will say sometimes like, oh, I used to be able to eat eggs and now I can't. I used to be able, right? Like we get those sensitivities or maybe what we consider allergies like as we age. And it could be just that our gut is now more of a mess than it was when we were younger, right? Like those, so it's not the egg, for example, but it's the part of the egg that's sneaking through our gut lining into the rest of our body, and our immune system's like, I've never seen that before. Like, I don't know what's going on. So it's that gut lining, that bouncer, the immune system that is, that can be kind of compromised. And then the body's like, whoa, why are you here? You're supposed to be over there. And then those reactions are what we feel, right? It's that inflammation response, that immune response, like, and then those symptoms that we just went over, any of those is what you might feel when that happens.
Now, what sort of factors would lead to that change in one's gut that would cause that that response to change, I guess?
Yeah, so it can be a number of things. It can be what we have and what we don't have. So what we're eating, for example, if we're drinking out of plastics, if we're eating food that's been sprayed with pesticides, if we've maybe taken antibiotics or, we're on other pharmaceuticals, like things like that, toxin overload, environmental pollutants. I mean, some things we can control, some things we can't. Processed foods with like artificial colors and sweeteners and flavors and those refined sugars and those refined inflammatory oils, all of those things upset our gut environment. And so they can kind of like poke these little holes into our gut lining. And that's where those, invaders, right? Or the culprits sneak through. But those are kinds of things like the way we eat, the way we drink, the way we live, the more chemicals and the more processed food that we take in, it can kind of like take a toll on our gut. So those kinds of things are what we take in. And then what we're not taking in are those like whole unprocessed foods that like are fiber rich, like our vegetables or like fermented foods or things that are probiotic rich that are going to like help maintain our, gut environment.
So I guess that connects to the whole concept of people growing out of allergies as well, because if you can manage to reinvigorate your gut or your digestive tract in some way and get it back to the way it's supposed to be, then you can grow out of an allergy.
You can grow out of it. Yeah. So that growing out of it has a little bit to do with like the immune system learning as we grow.
Right.
So we don't have a fully developed immune system when we're born. And so we're constantly learning about what's good and what's bad, as we grow. So a lot of kids will grow out of allergies. And that's why you see things like eczema, like in little kids, because they just don't have quite the immune response yet to deal with that. But a lot of them will grow out of it because the body's learning like, oh, that's not an invader. Oh, that's okay. Oh, nope, that's bad, right? Like it's developing. So you can grow out of what you're sensitive to as like a baby or a toddler.
What is that connection between food allergies and eczema and or asthma? How does that come about?
So they're all immune responses. And so the chemicals released by your immune system lead to the reactions and symptoms that we talked about, right? Like the runny nose and things like that. For some people, like it leads to asthma symptoms, so that inflammation can be in the lungs, right? Or like, so that's just one way. And then as far as eczema, same thing. So there's a protective layer of skin. I mean, there's several layers of skin, but it's a protective layer. And especially when skin is like dry or compromised, or even you get a cut or something like that, then the barrier has been removed, right? So you're more apt to, get something like eczema because the bacteria and the pathogens that your skin normally keeps out, it's not doing anymore. And I don't know about you, but like when I would have skin problems, it was a lot of times on my hands.
Mhm.
because that's where, like, you know, I was washing my hands a lot, especially when my son was younger, or when I worked in restaurants, right? Mine was constantly wet. So that's where your skin is compromised. And so people see a lot like here or like on their fingers, you know, so places where you see eczema tend to be places where the skin can be compromised.
Now, we know about some of the more common allergens. The ones that come to mind would be peanuts, seafood, shellfish in particular. What are some of the less common, some of the rarer allergies that you've come across in your line of work?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. So 8 foods account for 90% of the allergic
Oh,
reactions.
really?
So the ones you said, so it's milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, peanuts, tree nuts, wheat, and soybeans. So those account for most of the allergic reactions. And again, it kind of depends on if it's an allergic reaction or if it's just that
Yes,
sensitivity.
yeah.
And so I have seen people, you know, become sensitive to seeds, have become you know, sensitive to different like, you know, vegetables. Like you know, I have a client that can't take in broccoli, right?
Really?
So we don't know, you know, it could be the fiber, it could be the sulfur, it could be, you know, some sort of like compound in the particular food. But yeah, we've seen a spread, a widening of the foods that people are allergic to. So allergies have risen in kids, especially up 50% since I think the 90s. And then again, it's not only the increase in the amount of kids that have allergies, but like you said, it's like it's more, they're allergic to more, where it used to only be like you said, like maybe milk and shellfish and
Yeah.
peanuts, you know, maybe tree nuts. And now it's like soy and it's eggs and it's, you know, all these different, I mean, I've seen like, you know, mustard, corn, like, you know, people
Sure.
look for things without those kinds of ingredients because they're sensitive to it. And then things like artificial colors, like, I mean, everyone's sensitive to them to a point
Yes.
because they're terrible. It's just, are you so sensitive that you see a reaction?
And why do you think we're seeing this greater prevalence of these allergies in children these days?
Yeah. So I think that there's a couple theories, but one is that we're too sterilized. It's like the
Yeah.
hygiene
Yeah.
hypothesis, right? Like we're not populating our gut with the microorganisms that we need to educate the immune system. Like I was saying, like with little kids, right? Like
Yes.
your immune system is growing and learning. But when we have antibacterial everything, antimicrobial everything, you know, here in California, 40% of the births are C-sections, which
Yes.
doesn't allow the child
Yep.
to gather the beneficial bacteria by going through the birth canal. So
Yep.
that's a huge miss that I think we don't realize, right? Like there's a disconnect. I think there's studies showing that, but I think in general, we don't realize that we're spending more time indoors. So all of those things are kind of leading to not giving our bodies a chance to learn what microorganisms are good and bad. You know, having a pet is helpful, being outside is helpful, being a younger child is helpful.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not saying don't clean your house, but we have this, like we're going way out in left field
Yeah.
about sterilizing everything. And it's really not giving our bodies a chance to, you know, create this immune system that is going to help us later in life. I think also we stopped introducing a variety of foods. So when those allergies, like the peanut allergies and nut allergies, like started to become more well known, you know, parents were not feeding their kids those in kind of assumption that maybe it's going to be an allergy or
Yes.
you know, preventative. And now there's really, all the studies are saying you should introduce a variety of food, and that's going to lower your chance for having an allergy, you know, as little as like, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, you know, start introducing them to a variety of things. And it's been shown to have like a steep, like 80% lower chance of having something like a peanut allergy when they're introduced to it regularly.
When our son was incredibly young, I had a plan that when I was in a situation where I could take care of him if something happened, I did introduce peanuts and oysters at a very, very early age. And scallops, yes, and scallops. And I got into a lot of trouble with my wife when she discovered what I had been doing, because she wasn't complicit with me in this entire experiment. But it seems to have done extremely well, extremely well. Thank you very much
Yeah.
once again. Have a wonderful month, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Sounds good. You too.